Thanks, James. Very cool to see our technology at work, keeping businesses secure so they can, well, concentrate on what really matters to them.
Indeed, and thank you, James. And now let us welcome to the stage our own ESET's Chief Evangelist, Tony Anscombe, who will be in discussion with our guest, Robert Heinz, the Information Security Manager at Swinkels Family Brewers, as well as our own Daniel Kromek, the ESET's Chief Information Security Officer.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing this talk about cyber resilience. So welcome to the stage, Tony, Robert, and Daniel.
Firstly, thank you guys for joining us, and it's great to be here. So this is what we define as a customer panel, and we've got two very different customers here. Our internal customer as our CISO, and Robert, fortunately you're coming back for the second time to join our customer panel, having done this virtually last year, so I'm delighted to have Robert back again. So Robert has worked in the finance industry and now works in the brewery industry. So this is, to me, critical infrastructure. He's an essential employee, without question, and he has samples, apparently, for us all after our customer panel. That is correct, isn't it?
It is,
yeah,
yes.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
And Daniel is the ESET CISO, and for me, that's an incredibly important task because as a security company, you're always a target. Yeah, there's always somebody out there that doesn't like us. They even leave the snippets in code. So welcome, guys. Thank you. So over the last 2.5 years, in fact, I've been in the industry, 25 years. So in the last 2.5 years, I've seen a monumental change in the cybersecurity industry from being the back room, the guys down the hall, to being at the forefront of the business. Now, obviously, we saw this with the pandemic, and we all very much are aware that actually cybersecurity enabled businesses to continue, which was super important. But I think it's also changed in the last year to 18 months, where you've seen ransomware demands, and I know there's a cyber insurance panel later on, and we heard about continuity from Jake. But ransomware demands have gone from $50,000 to $100,000 to CNA Financial paying $40 million last year. And at the end of last year, you saw that massive demand of MediaMarkt for, what was it, $240 million. So a huge demand. And then latterly, we've seen conflict in Ukraine. So I'm kind of curious from both of you how it's changed from the internal cybersecurity officer perspective, of where you're no longer in the back room with the hoodie on, yeah, to being at the forefront of the business. So,
I think the main thing that changed was that in the past it was, somebody else was a target or was hit, so there was an incident. So people in the business heard about it, and they forgot about it. It's always somebody else. And now it's always close to you, in your supply chain. And then when it comes into your supply chain, then the business starts saying, okay, this is actually affecting us. Maybe we're not the victim ourselves this time, but even though if your supply chain is hit, then there is impact.
And do you see that, do you see yourself being involved in more of the business discussion than maybe once you were?
Yes, because of this, all the things you want to improve for cyber resilience get more attention.
I now feel like Madonna just had my mic moved. But anyway, sorry, go on.
So, yeah, so in the past it was all, it's difficult, we don't have time for it, it's too expensive, things like that. And now you can say, okay, but if we want to be in business, we need to improve our business to make sure that we can still produce beer, sell beer, etc. So, for example, last year our can producer was hit by ransomware, and we have just-in-time delivery with cans. If we don't have cans, we cannot deliver the beer to the supermarket. So that's a real serious incident.
And this is a super interesting thing, actually, in your business, isn't it? People, I would tend to think you're producing beer and it's kept in a warehouse, but it's not. It's an on-demand product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the same that you see now with Ukraine and also with the pandemic. The just-in-time delivery on itself is, of course, under discussion, if that's very wise to do. It was in the past for economic reasons, but now.
So you're becoming more and more important in the business. So Daniel, I mean, over the last 2.5 years, how's it changed?
Yeah, I think these times are challenging, and they are challenging in like multiple layers. The attacks we see increased, definitely. We are focusing more on business continuity because of the war activities behind of our courtyard. So that's like another change within this year. But overall, I think that the trend is clear over several years that the risk and complexity is rising over time, and complexity not just in our own IT environment and environment, also physical, but also complexity of our suppliers ecosystem. And also we see a growing trend in the regulations and compliance affecting mostly finance industries, critical infrastructure, but also ESET.
Yeah. And we're definitely going to come back to that legislation and compliance question in a moment. Now, to put it all in perspective, I mean, I think the FBI IC3 report recently stated $6.9 billion is the cost of cybercrime. Now, depending on whose number you believe and you know, whatever, but I think this is probably a reasonable one because this is the cost to business that is reported crime,
Yes.
as opposed to a prediction from anybody else. And you know, we've certainly seen other numbers. What is interesting is they point out small businesses. I mean, how big is Svinkel's
We have
brewery?
turnover of 930 million euro,
Right.
so almost a million.
And a business of a few thousand employees, maybe we're in that middle sector.
Yes.
So it's a sector that is now becoming significantly focused. And now I know we're in Europe, but I'm going to leverage something from the US here. The US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency provide this great tool and this great self-assessment tool for cyber resilience. Now, I'm going to read these because I don't want to miss one of them. Is asset management, control management, configuration change management, vulnerability management, incident management processes, service continuity management, risk management, external dependencies management, training and awareness, and situational awareness. I mean, to build a resilience plan and build the continuity that actually Jake was talking about earlier on, I mean, how from a smaller business perspective and that mid-size perspective, how do you go about actually building that plan?
Well, I think it's looking at it from the business perspective as not seeing cyber as an IT thing, because then this is not going to work. You won't get all the effort of the people who you need for this resilience plan. So you need to do it from the business perspective, making sure that what you do is for making your product, being able to sell your product, to keep in business. And then, of course, it's a lot of work, also for smaller companies. But you need to think of, okay, look at what's most important and start from there. It doesn't have to be from 0 to 100% in one way.
And we should be clear what cyber resilience probably means as well. Is cyber resilience is about the ability to continue doing business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's realistically, and how if somebody turns off, for example, the power, because cyber incident can be many things. How does the business operate? To Daniel, I mean, as ESET, we distribute around the world, data and connections and delivery of product. I mean, how do you manage this on a daily basis?
Well, my answer would be probably similar to what you just said, because you need, first of all, get business on your side, because otherwise the business requirements will trump IT requirements and security requirements. So if business owners see the continuity of their IT services as critical and vital for the business, then they will support things like business continuity plans, writing and exercising. If not, then they will see it as a waste of time and they will not support IT guys to do them. So first of all, we need to get these business managers on our side, and then they will prioritize also these kind of activities. And IT guys, some of them may be pain for them, but at the end of the day, they will sleep better when they know that all their backups are fine-tuned, tested, they have plan, so even junior colleague can restore the database from backups, not just the senior guy who need to be on call 24/7.
So I think what you're both saying is it has to start from the top down.
Yeah.
You've got to have a C-level buy-in
Yeah.
for actually doing this to start with,
Yes.
which I think is is super important to any business. But I mean, how frequently is this a one and done plan? Do you have to go back and visit? And how frequently do you have to go back and visit?
Well, of course, it's a continuous process, but it's now you're touching the issue, for example, in a production facility. You know, how test in production a complete brewery. That's the difficult one. So, and that's work in progress, so to say.
So you have very specific other challenges as well about supply chains of goods coming in, because you can no longer produce a product if the supply chain becomes affected. Maybe slightly different for us.
Well, yes and no. The technology itself is, I would not say isolated from suppliers, but we do a lot of things by ourselves. But there are other parts of the company which rely heavily on suppliers. So it's nice that we can ship the product, but if we cannot submit the invoice to the customer, we will not receive the money. So we need to also focus on other areas, not just the development of the product.
That's nice. We've got a CISO here who's conscious about getting the money in. That's nice. I like that.
Not just spending money.
Yes. I'm going to go and tell our chief business officer that you said this. I'm sure he'd buy you a beer. Has it changed in the last? We've seen the conflict in Ukraine in the last 3 months now. I know we spoke the other day, Robert, and there's a campaign running in the US called Shields Up, run by CISA, and Shields Up is designed to raise awareness that potentially cyber attacks can come on against anyone for any reason, and it's specifically aimed around the conflict of a nation state or a disgruntled actor out there that has some sort of love with one side of the conflict or the other, may come and inflict cyber crime on someone. But has it changed in the last 3 months? Has the management come and changed the way you guys are looking at it as a brewery? Has the conflict caused an issue?
Yeah, but actually that's on the financial part, because of the ingredients are getting more expensive. So related to cybersecurity, the conflict is not has a huge impact for us. But there are other aspects really relevant, yes.
Right. And
Well, same here. We did some priorities reshuffling right after the war started, and I will definitely talk more about it during my presentation. So now I can say that the main focus were protection of our infrastructure and business continuity, not just like IT continuity, but overall business continuity, including people and other types of resources.
And of course, as we've heard, our researchers have done a fabulous job of actually looking at malware in this entire conflict. So again, it makes us that bit more of a target. So I take my hat off to you and say what a great job. Now we've heard, here in Europe, everybody's very much GDPR focused. And when we talk about cybersecurity and resilience, legislation and privacy legislation comes into this, and it's been, I think, a huge enabler in actually raising the awareness of cybersecurity a few years ago, and that data legislation, I think, maybe started that whole cyber resilience conversation a little bit. But is it that people have looked at their data and now they know where their data is, or have you put in data governance plans? I mean, have you gone that one step further and understood how to reduce access to data and actually manage the data, as opposed to just complying with legislation?
Well, for us, for the management, it was more like, okay, it's not, you know, the company needs to take care of its own. It's now external legislation ordering us to do things, which created the awareness to, yeah, what you said, and then you need to make sure you have the plans, know, yeah, how depending you are on IT, although you are a brewery. And a lot of colleagues still think, you know, we're just making beer, and yeah, we need a computer for it, but and they don't realize how depending they are, and that's what this whole thing starts. Yeah, knowing the dependency, and then work from there to make sure you be resilient.
I think we all have the dependency on beer, by the way. Yeah.
As of ESA, the business projects which trigger new data collection or change the data processing itself need to involve legal and DPO, because the DPO is not within the security team but within the legal team. And of course their main focus is the data minimization. What is the minimal set of data we need to have to achieve the purpose we want to achieve. So this is not done like recently, it's done all the time, and GDPR just stressed it out because the data collected need to be aligned with the purpose.
Okay, and I realize our audience is very global, and I'm kind of looking at our audience now. Is anybody here not affected by privacy legislation? And see, nobody can put their hand up. Now I say that because if you actually look at privacy legislation over the last 2 or 3 years, or certainly maybe 4 years, there's 100 different pieces of privacy legislation around the world. So I think it's actually now kind of that whole movement is progressing. And GDPR is still seen, I think, very much as the gold standard. But talking about specific legislation and coming back to my cyber resilience, we're seeing very specific legislation around disclosure. Now, I have a personal feeling about these disclosure pieces of legislation. I somewhat feel like the burglar has left the house. If you're having to disclose an incident after it happens, you know, I pull up outside my house, I go inside, and I hear somebody in another room, and the house is meant to be empty. I'm going to sneak back to my car and I'm going to dial the police and want them to come and apprehend the criminal. I'm not going to wait for him to run off down the road with my fine artwork and then ring the police. And these disclosure legislation seems to be on that latter. It's a post-event happening. So I think hopefully we're going to see some of that change. But do we see legislation which has become political? And I think a lot of this has come from Colonial Pipeline, in fact. Certainly the legislation you're seeing the United States push out has... and that's because voters had to line up at gas stations. Once it affects voters, it becomes political. Do we think legislation is going to help cybersecurity, or do you think it's going to hamper? I mean, the more regulation and bureaucracy we get, is that going to help innovation in cybersecurity, or is it going to hamper what you do on a daily basis?
Well, for us, it's a benefit. What surprised me when I joined the company is that there's a huge focus on physical security. You know, preventing that somebody puts poison in the beer or whatever. While this is totally automated, 90,000 bottles per hour, you know, it's very difficult to do something there. Whereas on the digital security, there's nothing. And because it's operational technology, you know, a plant, you buy a machine, the machine runs for 25 years. So you cannot patch, update everything. So you work with legacy solutions. And then you see suppliers who, because they are not forced to invest in security, who just say, this is the machine, take it or leave it, and they're just a few suppliers, so you have no option. And that's where legislation comes in. You know, if it's ordered to have secure remote access for your supplier, for example, then they have to comply with that. And at this moment, it's, you know, that's not there, and that surprised me, because what you said, it's you know, you can discuss if beer is critical, but it's food, huh? So, and that needs to change, I would say.
Does anybody disagree that beer is essential, by the way? Yeah, no, nobody's put their hand up for that one either. So we all think it's food. I'm curious, can I just go back to one point there? You mentioned physical security, and I think that's a super interesting aspect, because we live our lives in cybersecurity thinking about that virtual world and that digital world, etc. I'm just curious, do you join the two pieces up? So if somebody's using a door badge in one location, but they're signing on from another location, is it that sophisticated yet, or is it?
The brewery in the Netherlands is 55 acres.
Oh,
So that's a huge, it's the second largest production of food in the Netherlands. So that's quite difficult to have your your physical access management completely in place. No, it's not that sophisticated.
No,
But of course, we have, the locks on the door, etc. But not, the example you made. That's
yeah. No, and I asked that question very specifically. I sat through a presentation recently from somebody with an advanced access system that actually does relate the two together. And maybe that's a discussion we should have later on, because it was super interesting. Daniel, legislation is hampering or good?
Yes, both, actually. Legislation is good to get the management attention, because if you see articles in newspapers about fines, which are towards companies who had breached, for example, for personal data, that definitely gets management attention, because that has not only monetary damage but also like brand damage, and this is something which we all want to avoid. On the other hand, these regulations which we are subject to, they are not maybe so strict as other sectors. So our own selected ISO 27001 is usually more strict than what we need to have because of GDPR or other types of regulations. And as of the reporting requirements, these are unpleasant, because you have deadlines in certain amount of hours, or you need to report immediately because of some regulations. But we are used to it not just because of the government, but also because of the cooperation with our suppliers, because large SaaS cloud suppliers, for example, requires their customers, including us, to report breach over our own accounts. So if my user is compromised in some SaaS cloud, I need to report to SaaS cloud that, hey, I have a compromise here.
Right, so it has a benefit, but it's a complex. I think it's a complex benefit, and I think it's interesting now. In the US, I think it's becoming very complex, and I'm leveraging my own experience here of living in the US. If you look, you have the FDIC who have proposed some regulation. In fact, they've imposed theirs. You have the US Securities and Exchange Commission. You've got CISA, and you've got other agencies, all with these proposals coming forward. But the most interesting one I think I've read recently is the Securities Exchange Commission. They imposed some regulation on advisors, so financial advisors within the SEC circle. And they've now proposed a second set of extending this across to all companies listed on the exchange, so on the NYSE. And if we go through the list of disclosure, it looks like pretty much everybody's very similar. Of identification of a cyber incident, what a cyber incident is, and when you need to disclose, and whether it's 24 hours or 72 hours. But there's one thing at the bottom that stands out. There's one extra point of, do you have a board member with cybersecurity experience? Now, it's only a question that a company has to report each year, and this is a proposal at the moment. But we all know that if somebody actually makes this regulation, what you're going to end up is with this scenario of public companies going, well, we need one of these board members with cybersecurity experience, which is, of course, good for everybody in this room, by the way, because you're going to all be approached to be on all these different public company boards, which is fabulous. But do you do you have a board member that's on your side? And I'd hope at ESET we do, by the way. Yeah. But more to the point, do you see that changing actually how other companies would operate? And specifically you, Robert?
Well, I don't think that such a statement, on itself helps. Of course, in total, creating more awareness, having security knowledge in the board is good. But you can easily answer that question with yes, and then, in fact, what do you know? So, but it's good, creating, what I said, the dependency on IT is so big these days. It doesn't matter which company or which business you're in. So it's good that this is part of it. Because it's like the CFO, we are still under the CFO, but everybody knows the importance of finance, but yeah, this is I would say equally important.
And maybe that's the bit it leverages, isn't it? Maybe it's when you put a proposal together and somebody goes to the board for a sign-off for financial reasons, then maybe that becomes somewhat simpler. Because if you have a friend on the board who understands cybersecurity, then we're going to move that along slightly. So the question is kind of moot with us because obviously, Daniel, our founders, our board members.
Yes, they are from R&D, at least part of them, so they are pretty security aware. But what I can see among my peers that the level of awareness on the board level is rising, and that helps in two ways. First way is that it protects the company, because usually these people have significant rights within the company which may be abused if they are attacked. And the other way is new business opportunities, because I have seen a lot of companies putting their security posture as a benefit, and benefit for the customers, that we not just process your money as a bank, but we also want to protect you as our customers.
Right. And I'm conscious of time because we're coming towards the end of our discussion. And I know there's a future panel later on, and I'm just going to kind of seed this future panel slightly, or hopefully with a point here. One of the things in a cyber resilience plan is often cyber risk insurance. And I'm kind of curious of getting a customer viewpoint of where cyber risk insurance fits in this cyber resilience plan. Because I sat on a panel of educators recently in Canada, and there was a particular person on this a member of, it was an engagement of audience as opposed to a panel. And there was a particular person who was very vocal saying everybody should have cyber risk insurance. I don't need to worry about security. And I'm just kind of curious, I want to put that question to both of you, of whether we do or not.
Of course, an insurance is just one way of mitigating the risk. So it's not true that if you have the insurance, you don't need to do anything else about security. I think a few years ago, it was easy, you know, the insurance was very cheap, and you just had to answer 10 questions, like, what I said, we have legacy software, but the questions were, you know, do you all have supported OSs? No. Do you install all critical patches within 24 hours? No. Do you all have named accounts? No, but we still got the insurance. So, okay, that's good. Why ask that? But what you see now is that they ask much more questions. You need to have much more in place. The cost is very high, and what is insured, you know, the coverage is limited nowadays. So the benefit of having the insurance, I would say, it's just one way of, what I say, mitigating the risk, but it's not, I would say that it's not much of a benefit nowadays anymore.
Yeah, completely agree. And when you have a security incident as a company, there is usually some time of struggle till you need to resolve the incident. Within this time frame, you may need additional resources, which can be provided by cybersecurity insurance, and this extra money buffer can help you as a company to sustain. But it really depends on the company business, company cash flow, etc., whether this buffer should be small, big, or what is fitting for the company.
Yes, yeah, no, and hopefully our cyber insurance panel in a moment didn't mind me asking that question. So I'm going to kind of throw, we've got about 2.5 minutes left of our time. Is there any questions from the audience that would be interesting? And we've got a young lady here with a microphone, should somebody be brave enough to ask us a question. And you're not putting your hands up quickly. There is free beer, by the way, on offer. So there we go. That got an arm up.
Thanks. So Robert, I was wondering, are there any security risks that you can think of that are unique to your industry? You say sets the brewing industry apart from other industries.
Well, I think on the risk side, mainly the part what I said about this. We have suppliers in the brewery who sell machines which are only a handful worldwide. So all breweries, actually all companies who put beverage in bottles or cans, use those machines, and that's the main issue. What you see in other industries, where I think you have more choice, and then the companies themselves are more willing to invest in security to make the business more secure. So I would say that's maybe not really different, but it's typical for our business. I would say that it's just a few companies who have a monopoly on selling the machines.
Does this mean you have to invest in the security of your own supply chain then?
Sorry?
Does this mean that you, as a company, have to invest in the security of your suppliers, of the supply chain?
Yes, but they're much bigger than we are. So it's the giant against the dwarf. We want this, but what I said, we asked them to, we required them to, and they said, no, we're not going to do it. Take it or leave it, and then end of discussion. And that's where the legislation part helps. So we were waiting for the NIS2 directive in the EU.
And I think this really highlights the fact that actually cyber resilience is not about the company; it's about its entire business, and all of its business, including all of its supply chain. And I think that was a great question. So time is up. I'd like to thank Robert. I'm going to preempt and turn and say next year for our third time. We're going to have you back. And Daniel, thanks for stepping in and being here as part of this event. So thank you for being on the panel. So thank you guys.